Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be doing the Wound Drinker. The Wound Drinker is an interesting one that can definitely come in handy for Thorns builds, and there's a lot that I've tested out for Thorns builds. Without going into like all of the details for the Thorns build stuff, I would like to at least flash this on the screen for those of you who are working on the Thorns builds. And you can ask questions, of course, on any of this stuff, but I have done some pretty extensive testing to find out answers on whether or not things actually work with Thorns and what doesn't. And the Thorns builds for the Spiritborn are pretty prevalent this season because, of course, the Gorilla here at Spirit Hall allows you to add Thorns to all of your attacks. And this is just a short list of some of the things that I was playing around with when it comes to Thorns damage. So before we get into the item itself, maybe even take a screenshot of that and put that in your Discord or wherever you're at, just so that you can get a better idea of like what works and what doesn't. Moving on. So first off, the Wound Drinker ring itself is actually pretty amazing for Thorns builds if you're trying to build a Thorns character. Not only does it give you poison resistance and armor as a passive, but it also gives you a Thorns bonus, which you can potentially get a greater affix on, which is pretty powerful. That, of course, is going to add to your base, and because of the way that Thorns works, where it calculates from the base, you're going to get a lot of multipliers on that base damage. So even though 373 Thorns doesn't seem like a lot, if you think about it from the base of a calculation, you can get a lot of additional damage that way. Utilizing a calculator really quickly, let's do a quick thought process and we'll see how this particular effect can work. So let's pretend, for instance, that I have 10,000 Thorns, which is possible, and I'm able to multiply that 10,000 Thorns by 5. Okay, I can multiply that 10,000 Thorns by 5, which gives me 50,000 Thorns. However, let's say I could sacrifice one of those multipliers so that I'm only at a 4 times multiplier, but I could double my Thorns value. If I double my Thorns value and I multiply by 4, you'll notice that despite the fact that I lowered my multiplier, the base was higher, and because the base was higher, I ended up with a much larger amount of damage. And this is the way that Thorns work, because your Thorns damage is the base of your attack, and then everything that you're doing from that point is multiplying your Thorns, so do keep that in mind. It also has a pretty nice damage to poisoned enemies, which comes in really crucial with the way that this particular item works. You want to have damage to poisoned enemies. And this is the greater affix at 172.5%, which is really nice. It is an additive bonus, though, not a multiplicative, so it's not as powerful as some other multiplicative bonuses that you can have, but it's an addition. It also has a damage reduction from poisoned enemies, which I find to work not really as effectively, but it's okay. It does have some problems when dealing with certain things that are not technically from the monster, or when the monster dies. There's been bugs in the past, and so it's not quite as static as something that's just a raw damage reduction. But it is a 9% point damage reduction from monsters that are poisoned. We also get a really nice bonus of +3 to toxic skin, or as you can see here, +4 if you have a greater affix. And although that's not really important to the way that this particular ring is working, it is useful in that it increases the duration. So one of the things that I noticed about this is if you look closely at the skill, it says at rank 5, the poisoning duration of the poison goes from 3 seconds to 5. And this is kind of important for if you're trying to use this ring to get the additional Thorns bonus, which is what a lot of people are going to be using this for, which is the toxic skin passively increases Thorns damage you deal to a monster that is poisoned by 100% times. So it's a direct multiplier to your Thorns damage if the monster is poisoned, which is pretty crazy. And I can kind of show you how this works, because I currently have a character set up with 269% of my Thorns damage applied to all of my attacks. So you can see here that as I'm attacking, I can get some pretty high numbers on this particular monster. As you can like 33 million there. Let's get my highest number. I'm going to try my best not to do anything else. So 33 million was my highest. Not exactly 11. That's 11 million. Now we're going to poison the monster. All right, that's going to increase my Thorns by a large number. Now you're going to start seeing much higher values because my Thorns, there's a 48.9, and so forth and so on. Because the monster is poisoned, I'm getting a huge bonus to that percentage, right? Now, I'm currently utilizing the ability. So I currently have Toxic Skin on my bar, and that means that I'm getting it that way. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can actually put this ring on and not have to have it on your bar. I've tested this. So it says every time you deal Thorns damage to an enemy, you gain 7 vigor, and you can also gain the passive effect of Toxic Skin, which the passive effect is where you get the multiplier for your Thorns. Now, if you put this particular ring on, you do not have to have the Toxic Skin ability on your bar to get the multiplier. However, you do have to have a point at least in the replenishing Toxic Skin to get access to the effect. So if you want this bonus, you do have to at least put 3 points into the skill. It doesn't need to be on your bar, but you have to put 3 points on the skill so you can get access to that bonus. And we're going to go over some more stuff here.
Mr. Goody Two Shoes, Mr. Goody Two Shoes. Ginger Evil Mentor here. Why bother farming when you can go to MMOEXP.com and simply purchase your items in gold? GGM would have you farm the items. What a pathetic being. Use code GEM Ginger Evil Mentor for 6% off your entire purchase. And don't tell Ginger Gaming Mentor that I was here.
So, when it comes to replenishing Toxic Skin, you also have to keep the monster poisoned, as we talked about earlier. So you're also going to gain that poisoning effect when the monsters hit you, but I wouldn't recommend relying on it. And I've actually kind of moved over to Scourge with this particular ability because I kind of want the monsters to be able to be poisoned all the time, utilizing an aspect called menacing, which is imprinted. Scourge continuously affects enemies around you for 8 seconds, up to 9 seconds if you have a perfect aspect. And you can clearly see it stays active for a rather long period of time, maintaining that poisoning on all targets. Now, there's a couple reasons why I recommend that you do not, and I repeat, do not, utilize the effect on this particular ring to gain the poisoning itself. So, as I talked about earlier, the monster needs to be poisoned, right? Well, there's a couple reasons. One of them has to do with the Paragon glyph that you're going to be using on a Thorns build. This is called Hubris. Hubris gives you up to a 2,000 Thorns bonus based on your dodge chance, so you're going to want to be stacking dodge with this particular build to get a large amount of additional Thorns added onto your character. Toxic Skin works by poisoning monsters that hit you. So if a monster attacks you, they are poisoned for 5 seconds. Well, if you're dodging all their attacks, you're not going to be applying that to them, and it does make it a little bit of a pain in the butt to keep them poisoned through Toxic Skin. But you do desperately want that replenishing Toxic Skin multiplier, right? So in that case, that's why I'm using Scourge, because Scourge just in general has a better effect when it comes to that kind of thing. Now, whether you're using Wound Drinker or not, you are going to at least get that benefit. I think that Wound Drinker is a fun one. It's definitely an interesting ring. It can be utilized in Thorns builds. It does have additional bonuses for your Thorns builds. It's not really a poison ring, as an example. But it could potentially be used to generate large amounts of vigor also by just simply including Thorns into your build. Just putting on the ring, even if you're not necessarily a Thorns character, just putting on the ring will give you a relatively large amount of restoration of your vigor. Because every single time a monster hits you, you're going to restore 7 vigor because you're going to apply Thorns to the target. It gives you the Thorns that you need to apply to the target, and it also gives you the Toxic Skin to make sure that the monster is poisoned basically at all times. So it could potentially just be used in a poison build for no other reason other than to grab the damage reduction, the vigor generation, the free Thorns, which you then were using to get the vigor generation, and so forth and so on. So it kind of has like a dual purpose there. If you did want to find one of these rings for your Thorns character, I would recommend a greater affix on the Thorns. And a greater affix on the damage to poisoned enemies would be really good, as well as the damage reduction to poisoned enemies. I don't really particularly think that the Toxic Skin is all that powerful or necessary for this particular build, and if you're not utilizing the vigor doesn't matter. So you could potentially, in some situations, look for a bonus, perhaps, of, say, like 1 on the unique effect, if you don't care about the vigor, And then instead of going for the vigor at all, you then go for the other bonuses. Like you go for a quad with like 1 vigor, and you could probably pick it up pretty cheap on one of the trade sites, because then you're going to have a maximum bonus to all the effects, and you don't really care about the vigor generation. So like maybe like me, you're going for a thrash build to get the damage through thrash, which is a basic skill, which doesn't really generate vigor, and then you don't have to worry necessarily about generating vigor, so that bonus doesn't really come into play. I think that's pretty much it for this particular ring. Let's go over where you can potentially find it, and let's talk about that. So let's pull up Diablo 4.life. On Diablo 4.life, you can go to the target farming tool. Let's go ahead and pull this up right here. So up at the top under tools, target farming uniques, and then you click on Spiritborn, and you go to Wound Drinker, and you'll see the Wound Drinker comes from the Beast in the Ice, which is also conveniently the place where you're going to pick up your Harmony of Ebiwaka, which you're probably going to want this season as well. So, you know, dual farming purposes there, looking for a perfect Ebiwaka and looking for a perfect Wound Drinker. I have yet to find a perfect Ebiwaka. It has been the bane of my existence at this point, but that's neither here nor there. My pain and suffering is not part of this video. Okay, it is a little bit, actually. You guys can giggle. The I do think that the Wound Drinker is an interesting ring. My only problem with it is it doesn't really offer any kind of multiplicative bonus to Thorns, and your ring slots often become very powerful ways that you can obtain multiplicative bonuses. Like, for instance, just as an example, if you had a Ring of the Starless Sky, which I don't think I have one in here right now, you could potentially put a Ring of the Starless Sky there, which would give you a 50% times multiplier. This is not going to give you a 50% times multiplier. You can also have things like the conceited aspect, which is for barriers. You can have generic multipliers. You can also have non-generic multipliers there. And as I showed you guys earlier, there are multipliers that work with Thorns, and stacking those multipliers can sometimes be more effective than the Wound Drinker. However, there is another interesting side to this, which is because you no longer need Toxic Skin on your bar, it does free up a slot for something else that you could potentially put in that place, which might increase your damage output higher. So that's an option. Like, for instance, with this particular build, I currently don't have Armored Hide on my bar, which is rather unfortunate. So if I wanted to include Armored Hide in my build, I could potentially go in that direction, grab Armored Hide, at least like 2 points into it to maybe grab the Thorns bonus, because there's a 400 Thorns bonus on the Enhanced Armor Hide, right? This would give me at least the passive effect of Toxic Skin. Then I could drop, say, like 2 points in Anti-Venom, grab the Enhanced Armored Hide, and now I have my Toxic Skin bonus, and I also have the Armored Hide bonus, which may or may not increase my damage, you know, higher, or it might make it lower, depending on whether or not the multiplier that I lost was an important one for my particular build. One of the main issues that I've come across with the Spiritborn so far is that he's very aspect starved in terms of the total number of aspects that you can utilize on your character, and it definitely does make for a very unfortunate situation in that you just don't really have a lot of bonuses that you can potentially utilize to your advantage. Your weapon is a double aspect, which means you're already limited by that, right? You're oftentimes utilizing, say, like the Rod of Kepeleke instead, which means you lose an aspect there as well. A lot of the times you utilize some very interesting rings or amulets, and you start losing aspects left and right. And before you know it, you've lost pretty much the majority of your aspects, and you have very few left. So another thing that could be something that you might want to consider for this particular character is that, do you want to put the Wound Drinker on if it means losing an aspect that you need to make the build work? And unfortunately, I think a lot of the people in Season 6 are feeling this. They're feeling the aspect shortage because the Spiritborn life is literally just being short on aspects all the time. And there's so many good uniques, and every unique that you put on is one less aspect that you can utilize for your character, and it just seems to get worse and worse, unfortunately. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining me as I'm going over these videos. Be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button on the way out. It really helps support the channel and, pay my electric bill. And as always, keep watching.